the varied perspectives. These are the journalisms by way of analytic aggregation, illuminated from the critical research of a historiography, neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental. Your engagement through a like, a share, or sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Engage impulse engines. Engage. Engage.
Engage!
Engage. 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 Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Captain. Engage emergency override.
Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage forward shields, 35%.
Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Aqsa raided for second night in a row. Watch this space. From the cradle, for second night in a row, Zionist troops raid Al-Aqsa. Heavily armed troops attacked Palestinian worshippers performing Ramadan prayers. Zionist police troops violently stormed Al-Aqsa mosque compound late on 5 April for the second night in a row, assaulting Palestinian worshippers with stun grenades and rubber bullets to evict them from the holy site. Zionist police attacked the worshippers as they were performing Taraweeh evening prayers, leading to clashes within the Al-Qibli prayer hall. Video footage shows the troops storming the holy site in large numbers before attacking the worshippers. According to Al Jazeera, a teenage boy was shot with live ammunition as the clashes erupted. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said that 6 Palestinians were injured as a result. It's the right of the Palestinian Muslim worshippers to exercise their religious duties and prayers in this holy month of Ramadan, and in other times in this holy Aqsa Mosque. Riyad Mansour, Palestinians' ambassador to the UN, said, "Throughout the day on Wednesday, Zionist troops attacked worshippers and violently pushed them out of the compound to make room for Zionist settlers who were preparing to enter the holy site under police protection. The night before, Zionist troops arrested over 400 Palestinian worshippers after launching a brutal raid on the holy site. Police forces smashed through the doors and windows of the Al-Qibli prayer hall, launched tear gas and sound bombs, and violently assaulted worshippers with batons. At least a dozen Palestinians were injured in the Zionist attack on the holy site, which coincided with the 14th day of Ramadan and the first day of the Jewish Passover holiday. In response, the Palestinian resistance fired a barrage of rockets from the Gaza Strip toward nearby Zionist settlements. Zionist jets then proceeded to bombard Gaza as the resistance fired surface-to-air missiles toward the aircraft carrying out the strikes. The violent assault on worshippers drew widespread condemnation from a number of Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt. The day after Zionists' second midnight incursion on 6 April, Zionist troops escorted scores of settlers into the mosque compound while continuing to carry out the customary Zionist policy of restricting Palestinians from entering the site. Around 300 Palestinians out of the 450 who were arrested during the raid on Tuesday night have been released but banned from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque for 1 week. On Thursday, an emergency session of the UN Security Council will be held to discuss the escalation. This will be the fourth emergency since Netanyahu's new government came to power. The continued Zionist violence against Palestinian worshippers comes despite the fact that Netanyahu said yesterday that the Zionists were working to calm tensions. From Memo, Turkey, protesters condemn Zionist violence at Al-Aqsa Mosque. 4 Turkish sites witnessed protests yesterday against a violent raid by Zionist security forces at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem overnight on Tuesday, Anadolu's reported. Protesters gathered in Diyarbakir, Bengal on Batman in the southeast of the country and Eskişehir in the northwest. Civil society groups organized the protests, including the Humanitarian Relief Foundation. Participants called on the Turkish people to support the Palestinians in the face of the ongoing Zionist attacks at the noble sanctuary of Al-Aqsa. In Batman, protesters gathered on Golistan Street in response to an appeal by the Freedom of Thought and Expression movement. From the platform, Samus Unlu told them that Zionist forces attack Al-Aqsa Mosque every Ramadan. He called on Muslims worldwide to take immediate action and not remain silent in the face of these injustices. On Wednesday morning, Zionist police arrested hundreds of Palestinians inside Al-Qibli prayer hall in the noble sanctuary after brutally assaulting them in horrific scenes caught on camera. The video images have gone viral on social media. Tensions have been escalating in occupied East Jerusalem and its suburbs ever since the formation of the latest Zionist coalition government led by Benjamin Netanyahu late last year. The coalition's even been described in the Hebrew language media as the most extreme in Zionist history, the Zionist entity's history. From C.News, Zionist forces storm Al-Aqsa Mosque again and evacuate worshippers. News agency correspondents confirmed that large forces of the Zionist police stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque grounds on Wednesday evening and emptied it of the worshippers. Local reporters revealed that the Zionist forces evacuated the worshipper from the Al-Aqsa Mosque before completing the Tarawih prayers after clashes. The correspondent stated that the Zionist forces fired rubber bullets and sound and gas bombs at the worshippers in Al-Aqsa, which caused clashes to break out in the courtyards of the mosque. A video clip showed several Zionist policemen moving toward Al-Aqsa Mosque. Commenting on the bloody developments in Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Palestinian presidency said the occupation insists on continuing its desecration and creating an atmosphere of escalation, tension, and instability. On Thursday evening, the Zionist forces stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque, assaulted the worshippers, and arrested a number of them. From Egypt today, Israeli government determined to inflame situation, Arab League says after Aqsa Mosque storming. Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League Hossam Zaki stressed to CNN that the Zionist government is determined to inflame the situation after its forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque and injured worshippers on Wednesday. Zaki added that he doesn't believe Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Wednesday remarks in which he claimed that the government's committed to maintaining the status quo at the Aqsa Mosque complex. In the occupied East Jerusalem, and that police were compelled to act to restore order. I think it's quite the opposite, Zaki stressed, adding, "We don't believe any of those words. They don't need any excuse to storm Al-Aqsa Mosque." Zakir affirmed that such confrontations have been expected several weeks before the holy month of Ramadan. The Arab League Council held an extraordinary meeting yesterday chaired by Egypt's permanent delegate to the Arab League, Mohammed Mustafa Arfi, who stressed that Al-Aqsa Mosque will remain disobedient to Zionist attempts to divide or control it. Arfi added that Zionist is provoking the feelings of all Muslims around the world by its blatant violations. The Council categorically rejected all forms of Zionist violations against Islamic and Christian sanctities in an attempt to change the historical and legal status of Al-Aqsa, the third holiest Islamic site. The Council held Zionists responsible for the crimes and measures committed to hamper freedom of worshiping in the Islamic and Christian sacred sites, warning of the flagrant provocation of Muslims' feelings. The Zionist forces fired stun grenades at Palestinian youths in Al-Aqsa Mosque, injuring many and arresting more than 400 worshippers during its assault. Wafa cited the Commission of Detainees Affairs as saying, "The Zionist entity's violations elicited a response from Palestinian fighters in the Gaza Strip, who fired missiles on southern Zionist entity, prompting frequent Zionist airstrikes." Egypt held the Zionists responsible for the dangerous escalation in the occupied Palestine lands, stressing that such action by the Zionist forces violates all international laws and customs. Zionist violence has been steadily rising since the return of Netanyahu to power with the new far-right government late last year. Zionist forces killed hundreds of Palestinians over the past year in the occupied lands. Netanyahu's government portfolios are held by religious and ultranationalist hardliners, including Itamar Ben-Gvir, who serves as the national security minister and notorious for his violent rhetoric and acts against Palestinians. And from Memo, South Africa condemns Israeli attacks on Palestinian worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque. The government of the Republic of South Africa has noted with concern the Zionist occupation forces' assault on Palestinian worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. In a media statement issued by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, the government in Pretoria said that it condemns these violent attacks acts by the Zionist government against the worshippers and calls for calm and the withdrawal of the forces from Al-Aqsa. At least 7 worshippers were injured during the attacks and more than 400 Palestinians were arrested. Most have been released since on the condition they don't enter Al-Aqsa. The use of stun grenades and tear gas on worshippers is unjust. These actions threaten the internationally agreed status quo in relation to the Jerusalem, or the the Al-Quds site and its sacred site, said the department. The Palestinian Muslim worshippers have a right to practice their religion in peace without fear or intimidation from the Zionist police. Al-Aqsa Mosque belongs to Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, and they don't require permission or approval from the Zionist government to enter or pray in the mosque. The South African government pointed out that the Zionist actions undermine all peace efforts and may lead to an explosion in the region. The year 2022 has been described as the deadliest year for Palestinians since the United Nations started tracking fatalities in 2005. More than 200 Palestinians were killed during Zionist attacks last year. At least 80 Palestinians have already been killed by Zionists since the start of 2023. Moreover, the South African government noted that the Zionists, as the occupying power, has specific obligations in terms of international human rights and humanitarian law to protect Palestinians. However, the Zionist government continues to breach these obligations with no accountability. Pretoria remains unequivocally committed to and values efforts aimed at reviving a political process, leading to ending the occupation so that the human rights of all are secured. South Africa's Minister for International Relations, Naledi Pandor, was reported as saying in July last year that the Palestinian narrative evokes experiences of South Africa's own history of racial segregation and oppression. She pointed out that the government in Pretoria believes that Zionists should be classified as an apartheid state. Zionist Israel should be classified as an apartheid state. And from Palestine Chronicle, UN Security Council to hold emergency meeting on Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. The United Nations Security Council is expected to hold an emergency closed session on Thursday to discuss Zionist violations at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Al-Quds Old City, the official news agency Wafa reported. The joint request came from Palestine and Jordan, with the support of the United Arab Emirates and China. It comes after the brutal attack by the Zionist occupation forces on the Palestinian worshippers in Al-Qibli Mosque on Wednesday. Palestinian worshippers were forcefully removed from the holy compound to clear the way for the storming of the Jewish settlers marking the Passover holiday of the Muslim holy site. And from Memo, Hamas, events at Al-Aqsa are existential battle. A senior member of the Palestinian Islamic resistance movement in the diaspora has described events at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Al-Quds as an existential battle with the Zionist enemy and its racist government, Quds Press has reported. Abdel Jabbar Said added that it's also a battle of wills and sacred rights. Said stressed that this morning that the Zionist attacks on those in the regional or in the religious seclusion, the itikaf, in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and its sanctity as a place of worship, must be challenged with all the kinds of resistance. He called on the Palestinian people to intensify their presence in Al-Aqsa Mosque and to go into seclusion therein their hundreds of thousands to confront this fascist, racist attack. Hamas, he pointed out, insists that seclusion in the mosques is no longer optional, but it's a religious obligation in defense of Al-Aqsa Mosque and those within it. He urged everyone to mobilize and go to Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, and Al-Aqsa Mosque by all means possible to support them. The Zionist occupation attack on the sanctuary was an attack on the entire Arab and Islamic nation. Said said in an address to the people of the region, and it calls for taking to the streets, announcing support for the Palestinians, standing by those in seclusion, and Al-Aqsa Mosque, and putting pressure on the occupation to stop its racism, fascism, and aggression. He called on the Arab and Islamic world not to let Al-Aqsa down. And from politicstoday.org, let's be clear, Zionist minister Ben-Gvir incited violence at Al-Aqsa Mosque. The world watched in shock as the Zionist occupation forces broke into the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Al-Quds, beating worshippers and forcing them out of the second holiest site in Islam. It's actually the third holiest site. That's incorrect, but I mean, it depends on, I don't know if that's necessarily like a quantitatively accurate nomenclature. You know, it could be based on something more arbitrary than quantitative data. Some 400 Palestinians were arrested, 100 were injured, 2 of whom are in critical condition, while the invading forces destroyed a small clinic attached to the mosque to prevent providing medical care to those in need. Ambulances and hundreds of Palestinians who protested outside the gates of the mosque were prevented from entering. Zionist forces broke into Al-Aqsa and forced worshippers out to clear the way for right-wing Zionist settlers who plan to storm the holy site during Passover on Wednesday, April 5th. These Israeli provocations are the immediate result of an incitation by radical Zionist National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was formerly convicted of criminal charges and who as a lawyer defended and celebrated Zionist settlers burning a Palestinian family. During an interview on April 4th, Ben-Gvir said, "Jews should storm the Temple Mount because it's not only for Arabs. I call on Jews to storm the Temple Mount. It's the most important site for the state of the Zionists. I don't accept that only the Muslims enter the site. Jews too have human rights in this country, and they have the right to break into the site. I will too storm it, but not on Wednesday." His proposal was that the Zionist settlers, or occupiers, should break into Al-Aqsa, but without offering sacrifices, again, because there are human rights for Jews too in this country. Palestinians know these human rights well. They've been deprived of them for 75 years. Human rights are what remains of democracy in Zionist-occupied Palestine today is only for Jews. It's no coincidence that the so-called democracy protests in Zionist Palestine, occupied Palestine, almost completely ignored the Zionists' ongoing occupation of Palestine and concentrate exclusively on the rights of the Zionist Jews rather than the rights of Palestinians, who don't even come second in this narrative. Some Zionists today feel threatened by the growing influence of right-wing religious parties which make the majority of Netanyahu's government. These fears, however, have nothing to do with Palestinians. Most Zionists, be they on the right or left of the political spectrum, agree on the need to continue the occupation when they have no problem with what the world recently witnessed at Al-Aqsa. The world will get used to it, or so they tell themselves. Instead, they're concerned that the Zionist government, which was formed on the premise of making life for the Palestinians who are already second-class even worse, might suppress some of their rights. Palestinians have no place in this equation, and that's why they are not involved in the ongoing protest in Zionist Palestine. One of the demands Ben-Gvir was conceded, and a quid pro quo for postponing judicial reforms until the summer, was forming a new force under his command which mainly arms to target Palestinians. As if Israeli police and army violence directed against them, especially during Ramadan, was not satisfactory. In other words, Ben-Gvir, who provoked storming Al-Aqsa, will have a new force under command that will further crush the Palestinians, as we've seen on April 5th. In return for postponing judicial reforms in Zionist-occupied Palestine, which have nothing to do with Palestinians. Zionists have been implementing a plan to divide Al-Aqsa Mosque between Muslims and Jews, both in terms of space and time, as it did with the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron. This is why we see an increasing number of raids into the site during Ramadan, which sees increasing Muslim worship and presence there. Israel has been gradually implementing its plan to divide Al-Aqsa Mosque. Until 3 years ago, it rarely conducted raids into the mosque during the month of Ramadan. Now, not only do Zionist settlers break into Al-Aqsa during Ramadan, but they also raise the Zionist flag in it. The next step will be allowing biblical sacrifices inside and performing the biblical epic falling, in which they fall on the ground as part of their prayers at the sacred site, which is an open call for a religious war in the Middle East. This will necessarily translate into escalation in the Palestinian territories, which, as the least 2 years have shown us all, Palestinians will pay for heavily. Soon after the Zionists assaulted worshippers at Al-Aqsa, homemade projectiles were fired into southern Zionist-occupied Palestine from Gaza, to which Israel responded by targeting several sites in the coastal enclave. Similar to May 2021, such provocations will likely lead to further escalations, leaving more destruction and loss of lives on the Palestinian side. Except for shy condemnations, the world chose not to take action to bring Zionists' right-wing government to account. This silence will encourage the Zionist government to implement more aggressive and expansionist policies in the coming weeks, which will take the region, especially considering the ongoing domestic crisis in Zionist Israel, into a new military escalation. The world has to act now to prevent such escalation, which is building up at Al-Aqsa in Gaza, as Palestinians will not stand watching as the Zionists violate their rights to worship at the Holy Mosque. Zionist-occupied Palestine is trying to export its internal crisis into Jerusalem and Gaza, or Al-Quds in Gaza, and Palestinians will likely pay dearly for their policy, as they always have. And I'm going to push back on this just a little bit, this language. I mean, this person is a little bit pedestrian, especially with this idea of paying dearly. Like, what do you mean by paying dearly? Seriously? Dearly? You might want to use some more accurate, some more powerful language, especially when you're writing about something so unjust. And with that, I'm going to open the channel here and beam me up.
Beam me up, Mr. Spark.
Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up.
Beam us up.
Quickly. Beam us up home.
Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up.
Scott, prepare to beam us up.
Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up.
Beam us up.
Scotty, beam us up fast.
Stand by to beam us up.
Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up.
Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.